$15 minimum wage advocates are vowing to keep up the pressure on elected officials in Baltimore after the city's Democratic mayor vetoed a $15 minimum wage bill last week. Catherine Pugh dismissed questions by The Real News challenging the economic justifications she provided for vetoing a bill she said she would sign during her campaign.
We're raising our minimum wage. Do you know that? Right. And that we are on target to continue to raise the minimum wage. First of all, I think it's couched wrongly in the first place.
Meanwhile, supporters say now is the time for the public to lobby their city council people to support an override of the measure.
Time is not only running out, time doesn't even exist.
But the mayor's spokesperson said she's tired of hearing The Real News question the data she based her decision on.
But for you all, she's explained it. Go to the city council. Ask them if they're organizing to override that budget. Ask them if they're ready to override it. That's where your question should be aimed, not trying to be the brightest student in the class and show the mayor how much research. Okay?
That comment came after repeated questions by The Real News challenging the mayor's assertion a $15 minimum wage would kill jobs and increase unemployment. Peer-reviewed studies of nationwide minimum wage raises have not found those impacts anywhere. Wages have been raised.
I based my decision on the possible impact of the CDC report. I based my decision on the fact that when I talk to my surrounding jurisdictions, nobody is raising the minimum wage.
Past fiscal analysis by the Baltimore Development Corporation has also been flawed, most notably assurances in 2005 that now money-losing taxpayer-backed Convention Center Hotel would be profitable within 5 years. Instead, the project has to draw upon taxpayer funds to pay its debt every year. But a plethora of studies, including those done by the nonpartisan think tank Economic Policy Institute, have shown that a $15 minimum wage would also raise wages for surrounding jurisdictions, not just the some 100,000 whose wages would be lifted in Baltimore.
It's interesting. Leadership from the surrounding jurisdictions would be against Baltimore raising its minimum wage. I can only assume that that's partially because they know if Baltimore were to raise its minimum wage, it would put pressure on businesses in their communities to also raise their wages in order to hang on to their workforce. In some ways, there's this sort of collusion among local governments to keep wages low.
We got a response from new councilman Chris Burnett. He supports overriding the mayor's veto.
And so I would imagine that someone working at a McDonald's in Catonsville wouldn't mind driving down, Edmondson Avenue to make a higher wage. But I would argue that that's actually would put pressure on the McDonald's in Catonsville to raise its wages in order to remain competitive and have a quality workforce. And so I think that which would put pressure on the county itself to meet that demand and make sure that they have workers, quality workers as well, that aren't flooding the city. And so I think in the short run, there may be some truth to that thinking, but in the long run, it's also important that folks in the county make a livable wage too.
When the measure passed in the city council, it had 12 supporters, enough votes to override a mayoral veto. But as the Jewish Times first reported, Ed Reisinger, who we reached by phone, says he no longer supports $15 minimum wage because the finance department calculated it would cost the city more than $100 million over the next 4 years.
A lot of people have questioned that budget analysis because in other cities that have raised the minimum wage, it's not caused the negative impact that the city has predicted.
Those reports I disagree. I've been in the council, I know the budget, you're talking $119 million. You can spend it any way you want. It's $119 million. It was 4 years. The last year we got $45 million. If they really read the budget, you're looking at the school budget. You're looking at the $20 million deficit we got to look at. We're looking at the $12 million that is the youth fund. So it's that. Plus, there's a lot of other variables. I mean, I voted twice. Things are fluid. I mean, I changed my mind, but that's it.
But many analysts say this calculation is deeply flawed and contradictory.
Yeah, the finance department's report is full of holes and questionable methodological choices to the extent that they reveal any sort of methodology. And they assert that businesses will no longer locate in the city as a result of the higher minimum wage. They simultaneously assert that all of these low-wage workers from the surrounding jurisdictions will flood into the city to seek jobs, therefore crowding out the local workforce that the bill is intended to help. And I just think it's interesting that you can't have all the jobs leaving the city and all of the workers from outside the city flooding into the city to take jobs. Those two assertions can't coexist. Either the jobs are in the city or they're not. And I think that the contradiction there is just illustrative that they're really grasping at straws for any argument they can make to deny this minimum wage increase.
Mary Pat Clark has introduced a $15 minimum wage bill for the past 2 years. She says the measure can't be watered down any more than it already is. With exemptions for businesses with under 50 employees, they reach $15 in 2026.
And there's not much we can do with the legislation to have it mean anything. We can't extend it any longer than we have. We can't prepare for it any longer than we have. We can't take care of the small businesses any better than we have. And
it's already a compromise measure.
It's already a way big compromise measure.
Clark said she's disheartened to see the failure of an initiative that's aimed to help address some of the deep inequities laid bare by the April 2015 death of Freddie Gray in police custody and subsequent uprising.
We talk and talk and talk about the aftermath of Freddie Gray and the need to change our ways in dramatic fashion here in Baltimore in order to bring the city together and in fairness and justice. The Department of Justice has its requirements, and I think that's a positive step in the right direction. But aside from that, what do we have that's really any different in people's lives?
The mayor is set to introduce her veto to the city council on Monday, April 3rd. According to the city charter, the council must hold a vote to override the veto in 20 days. But the next council meeting isn't scheduled for 21 days from now. So a special session must be called, either by the city council president, who's already said he'll decline to do so, or 10 council members. Clark says she's working on gathering those votes now.
But I'm hoping to have 10, so that we can at least bring a close to this chapter if we lose, or win if we can.
And so what's your message for supporters of the $15 minimum wage? What should they be doing now to ensure that a vote even happens?
Well, you could ask all the council members to please support a special meeting that meets the deadline. That would be very helpful.
For their part, advocates of a $15 minimum wage have vowed to continue to pressure city council members, the city council president, and mayor to call for a special meeting and support overriding the veto. As of right now, the council does not have the 12 necessary votes. In a statement, Courtly C.D. Witherspoon, who was organizing a rally at 5:30 for City Hall, said, quote, "I think we shouldn't allow the mayor to renege on her campaign promise, particularly when she received campaign donations, in-kind donations, and campaign volunteers from organized labor under the contingency that she'd work diligently to pass the $15 living wage." Activists also say they may disrupt the mayor's public appearances to show their disapproval of her veto. Stay tuned to TheRealNews.com for updates to this story.